These two paradigms represent the fundamental conflict of human organization. On the left, a self-refreshing toroidal system. On the right, a vertical hierarchy characterized by resource extraction. Standard anthropology suggests this transition to administrative ledgers and state-level governance was the inevitable march towards civilizational efficiency. Forensic analysis of early West Semitic epigraphy suggests a more calculated origin. The transition from fluid, multidimensional spoken language to standardized linear text functioned as an aggressive technological squeeze. Early administrative states utilized a mechanism called static overwrite. This process took the continuous reality of human experience and fragmented it into a rigid, linear syntax the state could measure and control. This administrative language acts as a hardware firewall, disconnecting humanity from its organic baseline to enforce a strict command and compliance matrix. Before this standardization, human language functioned as an open-source biological interface. Early scripts utilized 27 to 30 distinct phonemes, requiring broad vocal somatic resonance that actively stimulated the nervous system and tracked environmental currents. Our first objective is to trace the squeeze, how state scribal schools throttled these natural frequencies down into a rigid 22-letter control script. We'll examine attempts to break this firewall. Movements adopted local vernaculars to dismantle hierarchies, yet often collapsed back into the structures they sought to replace. Finally, we will introduce the expansive translation matrix. This framework utilizes specialized mathematical protocols to decalcify ancient texts and restore their original blueprints for a living system. Historical analysis reveals the cage, but a mathematical framework is necessary to actively strip away the institutional gatekeeping embedded within our foundational philosophies. The compression begins with the transition from the rich Proto-Canaanite script to the standardized 22-letter templates of Phoenician and Paleo-Hebrew. This was not a loss of characters, but a deliberate merging of distinct frequencies. The Iron-Gein merge exemplifies this exclusion algorithm. The symbol for the eye signified direct observation, while the twisted vine represented multidimensional tracking. Priestcraft violently merged these frequencies into a single, flat character, blinding our internal tracking of non-visible energy grids. This squeeze extended to the Chet-Ket merge. The original Ket sound required a deep, raspy breath from the diaphragm to pronounce. When state administrators flattened this sound into the standard Chet, the phonetic twisted thread of vitality was recoded as a rigid courtyard wall. This shift had direct somatic consequences. Removing high-frequency phonemes eliminated the biological mechanism used to stimulate the vagus nerve. Without this somatic feedback, the human biofield loses its capacity for deep, receptive listening and environmental resonance. By shallowing the breath and reducing the vocal somatic spectrum, the script induces a state of permanent linear tension. This hardware-level constraint anchors the nervous system into the analytical left hemisphere, ensuring behavioral compliance through biological contraction. We see the social result of this dynamic in 6th century BCE India. The socio-religious landscape was dominated by a strict linguistic monopoly enforced by the Brahmin priesthood. Formal Vedic Sanskrit acted as a ritualistic barrier. Because salvation required rituals performed exclusively in this language, the masses were systematically excluded. Siddhartha Gautama and Mahavira led a revolutionary counter-movement by explicitly rejecting this Sanskrit monopoly. They made the strategic choice to teach in local dialects like Pali and Ardha Magadhi, recording their insights on accessible palm leaf manuscripts. This shift decentralized spiritual merit. Inquiry moved out of restricted sacrificial enclosures into public open assemblies where anyone could engage with philosophical data without a priestly intermediary. By adopting the vernacular, these movements successfully moved sacred data away from a vertical command and compliance posture into a horizontal, collaborative framework, brand new written infrastructure for data preservation. Imperial committees engineered classical Tibetan, or Choke. Using standardized dictionaries, they established precise mathematical correspondences between Sanskrit roots and new Tibetan compound words. Translators unpacked the internal architecture of terms like Buddha. They created the compound sange, meaning awakened from the sleep of ignorance and blossoming into full intelligence. This project perfectly preserved high-frequency data, but it inadvertently birthed a new clerical theocracy. Because the engineered language was so specialized, true authority remained centralized within a monastic elite who held a total monopoly on the code. These historical shifts follow a recurring mechanical pattern. Movements that adopt local dialects to dismantle hierarchies eventually harden into new institutional systems of exclusion. This is the four-phase cycle: clearstream, static incline, new overwrite, and new monopoly. A revolutionary reform begins as a clearstream of accessible speech, but the institutional need for preservation induces the first layer of friction. As teachings are codified and frozen, the spoken language of the population continues to evolve. This creates the static overwrite, where the once accessible script becomes a dead, archaic liturgical language. This cycle reestablishes the monastic-lay divide. Knowledge is concentrated in clerical citadels, leaving the laity structurally dependent on the institution for spiritual merit and interpretation. Institutional gravity will always drift back towards centralized authority, unless the organizational framework itself is rotated from a vertical ladder into a flat toroidal loop. Bypassing millennia of institutional gatekeeping requires more than a new translation. It requires a structural deconstruction of graphical form, acoustic vibration, and kinetic intent. Moving multidimensional information into a 3D linear space causes significant data loss. We utilize Ramanujan's third-order Mach theta functions to model this process, recovering the unseen variables that were stripped away during the original linguistic compression. The expansive translation matrix treats ancient texts as functional blueprints for a living biological system. It restores the multidimensional encoding that the 22-letter squeeze was designed to erase. The IOTA protocol serves as the primary decryption tool for this matrix, neutralizing dualistic pairings back into a singular, fluid, homeostatic equilibrium. The goal of this protocol is the restoration of the biological field to its native zero-point baseline, where human awareness operates without the friction of administrative interference. We can apply this matrix to the Heart Sutra. While long considered a Sanskrit original, evidence shows it was likely a Chinese summary back-translated to Sanskrit specifically to gain institutional authority within the hierarchy. Standard analysis treats emptiness, or shunyata, as a binary abstraction, a simple opposite of form. The asymptotic expansion coefficient reveals shunyata as an active, fertile matrix, where a system stops generating defensive friction and settles into equilibrium. The decalcified translation reads, "Density is itself an open window. The open window is the very architecture of density." The sutra concludes with an acoustic sequence that functions as a mechanical release valve. These sounds reset the local field, clearing the neural channel into parallel resonance. Structural democratization depends on the total deconstruction of binary language abstractions. Reclaiming the toroidal field requires clearing the hardware firewall that currently fractures our perception of the zero-point baseline.